Can you tell that I'm a romantic critic? It's so bad. This is honestly like my nightmare. Hello everyone, welcome to the 5-Star Exchange hosted by Nell Diamond. I am one of the competitors, I guess we'll say, among 5. So it's myself, Nell Diamond, Katie from I Would Rather Be Reading, Bree from The Booktrovert, and Vanessa from Read with Dr. B. So the 5 of us are exchanging 5-star reads, right? Well, it's a little bit different this time around, especially if you are familiar with what Nell typically does in this series. I can't remember if I introduced myself. I'm Leandra, the TBR0, if you're new here. And if you are going to be enjoying this entire process and you're having a good time, don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you're interested in getting to know me better. But without further ado, let's get into this competition. Why is it different than what you might expect? Well, rather than us simply exchanging 5-star reads that we've personally enjoyed, there is a little bit of suspense, a little bit of sneaky switcheroos going on, because we have pretended to be someone else across this exchange. To give myself as an example, when I participated in this, I was given a name at random, and that name could have been Nell, Katie, Bree, or Vanessa. In receiving that name, I then had to create a list of, say, 4 to 10 different books that I believe represent that person. So it can be genuinely books that they gave 5 stars. It could be books I think that they would give 5 stars, authors that they've liked in the past, something to that effect. And then that list is randomized again and given out to someone among this group of 5. Meaning that the list I've received is representative of someone in the group, and it was doctored by someone else. So I am going to attempt to guess who this person was pretending to be, and maybe just giving a wild guess of who I think the original person was who created this list. Throughout this video, I will be vlogging my experience reading one book from the list provided to me, and then by the end, I will be locking in my guess for who I think this list represents and who I think the person was who created said list. So I should have 2 names by the end of this video. Then at the very end of the video, once I've locked in my answers, I actually have a reveal video from the person in question, which I'm very excited to see because I have no idea who it is and I have been fighting the temptation to watch. So the video's out there, but it will be tagged at the end to see if you also maybe guess right. But let's take a look at the list provided to me. I'm not gonna lie, I was only given 4 books, which I feel like is slim pickings. It makes it a little bit harder to narrow down who I think this list represents, especially because I would argue each book is a little bit different. It's a part of a different subgenre, or at least a category, under the entire umbrella that is romance. I think I'm going to have a harder time guessing who this list represents, especially because among the group, I'm really the only person who doesn't read romance quite a lot. So it really could be anyone, especially because within this group, every other person reads a lot of romance across the year, in my opinion, and I'm the only one who doesn't. So like, it doesn't narrow anyone down knowing that I was given 4 romances. The first romance given to me was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. So this one is interesting because it's super popular. It's pretty mainstream, to be honest. I know it was on the Goodreads Choice Awards, longlist, and potentially the shortlist as well. It's a name and a title that I recognize. I know that the author also has written The Dead Romantics and just came out with a novel love story, which everyone is reading at the moment. And yeah, so that's obviously not narrowing anything down just because I could see everyone reading it, just because it's so popular. It's not very niche. It's a very mainstream romance, I would argue. Then I was given The Rule Book by Sarah Adams, and I think this does narrow it down a little bit because Sarah Adams is definitely on the cheesier side of romance, more romantic comedy, very silly, very cute, not very spicy, although she does have spice in her books. It's usually narrowed down to maybe a couple of scenes, and you can very easily avoid it if you want. I have had experience with Sarah Adams before. I ended up reading The Cheat Sheet. I enjoyed it. It was one of my first romances ever. Actually, I tried it on audio. It was one of my first audiobooks ever too. And then I tried another book by her, and I can't remember what it was called, but it's the one with the hairdresser. And I DNF'd that one really quickly just because I think it's a corniness level that is just too much for me. So that gives me Nell vibes. But the only reason why it gives me Nell vibes is also because this month I know for a fact that she is reading it. So this could be a list that includes both 5 stars from this person and predicted 5 stars, because I could see someone predicting that being a 5-star read for Nell, but I don't know if that person like did that or if it's something that someone's read. And I'm trying to think of who reads cute, cozy romances. I mean, Vanessa and Bree both read pretty spicy romance, and so does Katie, but I could see among those 3, Katie being the kind of person who would be willing to try Sarah Adams, but I don't know, it doesn't really help. Then I was given Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher, and I might have to zoom into this one because we're trying to remember what the series is. The Lakefront Billionaires. I know that this is also extremely popular. People really enjoy this series. It's deemed a contemporary romance. I think that it is probably pretty spicy, I would imagine. I've seen the covers everywhere, and I know quite a few people who are in the middle of the series, and they've got certain preferences, certain, you know, perspectives of like who their favorite billionaire is, but it's not a book I ever thought I would read. So it's definitely not up my alley, but I'm trying to think of who would be most likely to have read this one. My mind goes to Bree for that one, but I'm sure that Vanessa and Katie would also be people who would pick that up. So this is tough. And then the trickiest one of all, we've had 3 contemporary romances, and the 4th one is Poison Study by Maria Snyder. It's a romantasy from early in the day, and the only reason why I know that is because Rainey recently read it for a vlog for the Battle of the Booktubers, and she was saying that it was maybe in like the 2000s, so before 2010 that it came out. I could be wrong there. Maybe it was in the 2000 teens, but I had never heard of it until she had read it, and she hadn't even heard of it. So this one really throws me for a loop because it is different, arguably, compared to Love Redesigned, the rulebook, and the 7-Year Slip. The 7-Year Slip does have some magical realism in it. I know that there are suggestions of like a timeline being slipped in and out of, hence the name, that this apartment, you know, houses different residents from different times, or like across 7 years, something to that effect. So we are kind of playing with magic in a way, but it does feel like the outlier. So this is tough to make an early prediction. On top of the fact that we have got romantasy with Poison Study, we've got very cutesy cozy vibes from the rulebook. The 7-Year Slip, because it's the same author of The Dead Romantics, I know that that handled grief to a serious degree, and I would imagine the 7-Year Slip is going to deal with some serious stuff as well, so that provides a completely different vibe. And then Love Redesigned, I think it would be a bit more on the spicy side, a bit more on the unrealistic side, because it's like falling in love with billionaires, you know, that classic trope. So again, these is across the board very different, and I don't really know which romance reader would read all 4. I could see Vanessa trying all 4 of these books, but I kind of expected there to be a bit of a monster-related book for her if I was going to get a list that represents her, just because I know that that's something that she is known for. I also would have expected maybe like cowboy romances, because that's something she's been into. Katie's been into it as well. So really, I'm kind of narrowing my scope down to Bree and Nell, and I don't know the rule book. I don't know how Bree feels about Sarah Adams, but right now I'm thinking Nell for this. We'll see if I continue to feel that way. Now, who is trying to pretend to be Nell? That's its own question. And I think it would probably be, in my opinion, maybe Katie or Vanessa. That might be a bit harder to try to figure out, but I'm thinking that this list represents Nell. That isn't me locking in my answer. We have an entire vlog to watch. But for now, the question is, what am I going to read? What of these 4 books am I going to start? And I have the book right now, actually. It is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. So on this list, I definitely don't see myself ever reading Love Redesigned. I also don't see myself ever reading The Poison Study. So it really kind of came down to The 7-Year Slip and the rule book. I am going to be completely honest. I started the rule book, and DNF'd it in like 5% because it just wasn't for me. So really, like, the only option that could potentially work for me is a 7-year slip, and it's because I know so many people who've loved it, and I also have heard really great things about the Dead Romantics. I wish I could have started with the Dead Romantics, if I'm going to be honest. I'm a bit nervous about this title just because there's so much hype surrounding it, but I feel as though I can trust the author to maybe handle romance in a bit more of a serious fashion, having a bit more dynamic, complex characters, adding more texture to the narrative as well. Because my biggest problem with romance is that we just have surface level feelings, that these characters are one-track mind, and it's very grating on me very quickly when all they can think about every single day of the week, 24/7, is this romance and how it's impacting them, and it just becomes too much. And also, like, the cheesy dialogue that you see a lot of times in romance. What else do I not like about romance? I worry that there are often some toxic traits, some romantic relationships that I actually think wouldn't work out. So I suppose a happy for now is something I'm not a huge fan of, because I don't like the idea, especially because it oftentimes is the woman who's in a relationship with a man and she deserves better. Like, I feel badly for the woman by the end because she's madly in love with someone who I don't think treats her as well as he should, or is being selfish, or, you know, has done something that isn't forgivable. So can you tell that I'm a romantic critic? It's so bad. This is honestly like my nightmare. This is the worst case scenario that I was given a list of all romances, and it is what it is. So we're gonna see how I feel about the 7-year slip. I am a third of the way through the 7-year slip, so I'm going to provide a very quick synopsis of what's happened so far. We've met Clementine, our protagonist, and she is dealing with stress at all areas in her life. She lost her aunt 6 months ago. She's still grieving her. She's recently moved into her apartment, which has opened old wounds. She also has just learned that in the next coming months there might be a potential promotion for her as well at the publishing company she works for, and she wakes up one morning to find a stranger in her apartment. And when she does, after some discussion, some back and forth, she realizes that all of the stories her aunt used to tell her about the apartment are true, that the apartment is magical, that it does sometimes fall into a 7-year slip, where it slips time 7 years forward or 7 years backward. You can't predict when it's going to happen, and you also can't predict when it's going to stop happening. And the reason why her aunt Analia knows this is because Analia experienced this herself when she first moved into the apartment. She ended up meeting Vera, who was the tenant 7 years prior to her, and they actually begin this whirlwind romance together. However, it's going to end in a bittersweet fashion, and it's a lesson that Analia passes on to Clementine. Weirdly, when Clementine is 12, I do think that that's a bit of an odd time to teach this to your niece, but when the 7-year slip ends and Clementine is back in her normal timeline, she seeks out Vera and meets Vera, who is now 7 years older, and they're in different paths. They have different goals in life. Vera wants children. She wants to move out of the city to the suburbs. I think she wants to move back to her hometown. And Analia doesn't want anything to change. She wants to continue to travel whenever she wants. She doesn't want children. And so they have to end their romance. That means that Analia's lesson to her 12-year-old niece at the time was to never fall in love in the apartment. So now Clementine, at 29, being an adult, is remembering this among her aunt's rules, and she is immediately attracted to Ivan, this stranger who 7 years prior was given the apartment for the summer while Clementine, 7 years ago, and her aunt were off traveling Norway. He is a young, aspiring chef wanting to begin, his journey throughout New York City and try to make his mark in the world of culinary arts. And I say young, but really he's not. He's 26 and Clementine is 29. And the number of times she's been like, oh my gosh, he's so young. He's in his young 20s. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's in his mid-20s. He's only 3 years younger than you. What are you talking about? Why are you acting like you're 40? So that is a critique of mine, that I'm like, we're really only talking about a 3-year age gap. And then in the present timeline, he's only 4 years older than you. So it's like, you're the same generation. Like, you're literally not that much different from him. And I find that very funny that that's so emphasized. And she's definitely going to have to obviously figure out what she wants to do and how she's going to be able to commune in the same apartment with him and prevent herself from gaining feelings, knowing that it's not going to end well. So far, it's been a really easy read. I haven't had very much trouble getting to page 100 at all, so I'm really impressed with that. And I do enjoy the descriptions of food. I'm assuming there's going to be far more, especially because Ivan is a chef, and that's been really lovely. I love it when books include food in their narratives to provide a good depiction of how relationships can grow in that way, connections, feelings. It's really lovely and cozy, so that's something I'm looking forward to. I will say that after cutting an onion, he does like go and like touch her face, like very close to her eyes, and I was like, I don't think that that's a smart thing to do. Neither one of them really noticed that happened, and I was like, you're gonna freaking make her eyes start to sting. Like, what are you doing? I am, enjoying it to a point. Am I enamored? No. Am I kind of confused by the fact that this is so well loved in the community, to the fact where I think this is argued as Ashley Poston's best book? I have never read anything by Ashley Poston, so I can't really compare her other works, but I don't find it to be that moving or complicated. I'm excited by the fact that we are, dealing with additional issues, other obstacles beyond the romance at hand. The fact that she is grieving her aunt, that obviously allows an additional texture to the narrative, and I prefer that in my romances. I get kind of frustrated when the only thing that any of these characters think about is the romance at hand. That just doesn't feel very realistic to me, and it tires very quickly. She's also dealing with work situations, the fact that she needs to prove herself in the next couple months, that she can handle the new responsibilities and juggle the work-life balance. So I'm hoping that'll be in the narrative a bit more too. But the one critique I have for now is that this author's very repetitive. There are a lot of descriptions about objects, about characters. For instance, the fact that lemons keep coming up. At the beginning of the book, there is the description of this chef, which we all very much can tell is going to be Ivan in 7 years' time. And one of his big, things on the menu is a deconstructed lemon tart or pie or something like that. And he calls Clementine lemon. And he calls it her a lot, too much. We don't say people's names as much as he calls her lemon. The description of the robin's egg blue chair, we've seen that 5 or 6 times. Also the connection of Jane Eyre, and I think that is almost too obvious now, to the point where I know who Ivan is. Ivan is Vera's son, and Annalea's friend that she obviously helped out is Vera. And now Clementine and Ivan are going to end up together as a stemming from Annalea and Vera's love that couldn't last. And I wish it was a little bit more nuanced. I wish it wasn't so obvious. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the second time that Annalea meets Vera in the apartment is that Vera is reading a Jane Eyre novel. And then out of all of the, connections, we see that Ivan's knife set, each knife is named after a Jane Eyre character, and I was like, okay. I know it's a well-loved novel, a well-loved classic, but I think it's low-hanging fruit whenever a classic like that is mentioned in books as well. So I will admit, as you can see, that I'm not super impressed by this book so far. It might be because of the mystery reader in me that I wish the author would trust us more. Say it once or twice, and know that it will stick in our minds, that we're invested enough that when the detail comes up again, it'll be this lovely, homage to earlier scenes. But when you do it 5 or 6 times in the first 100 pages, it begins to kind of grate on you. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But for now, I'm not super impressed, and it's feeling like a 3-star. And I feel like I'm being really nice by calling it a 3-star. Hey friends, so I am giving you another update. I'm on chapter 24, so I've read 125 pages. So far, this has gone in a completely different direction than I expected. I thought we were going to have more of a linear pattern with the narrative structure in which the entire summer we would have Clementine on her own, in her own apartment, in her own timeline, and periodically she would transfer back to 7 years ago, spending time getting to know our love interest. Apparently his name is Ewan. I've been told 3 different pronunciations. Ivan is the one I thought made most sense, just because Ewan sounds very strange from an American English vernacular, and Ewan, I know multiple people with that name with different spellings, and so my brain refuses to see that as Ewan. So, I mean, it's a toss-up. Maybe I should just go with Ivan because that's my preference, and Ewan just sounds really odd with like an American accent. So Ivan, I thought that we were going to get this kind of slow experience of making friends, strangers in an apartment, getting to know each other, understanding each other's differences, strengths, weaknesses, and then by the end of the summer, this feeling that maybe they're seeing each other less. The apartment is transferring Clementine to the past less often, and she can feel the end coming near. The fact that also Ivan was only meant to be subletting, or pretty much taking advantage of Aunt Annalia's apartment for a brief time in the summer, that when he intended to move out, she would realize that this, whirlwind romance would end. But that's not the case. So far, being 186 pages in, or 185, I should say, they've spent a weekend together. Only 2 days. And now she's met him in the modern timeline. And that's added a new twist, a new conflict, because she has different experiences or memories about their time. She's basing it off of the 2 days. And obviously the way he's interacting with her, we know as the reader that he is remembering her for multiple visits. I've already kind of seen the inconsistency of that. And I do have to say that this is kind of making me a little uncomfortable, the way that the narrative is designed, because in the modern timelines, the way he's interacting with her, it's just kind of making me cringe. And maybe it's because we know that they've only spent a weekend together. They don't know each other at all. And on top of that, this is an insta-love scenario, which I was 100% not expecting. Like, if I had bet money, I would have said this was going to be a slow burn where they were getting to know each other, or it was going to be a physical relationship with no strings attached that would slowly grow into more feelings, just because of how I thought the premise was going to end up playing out. But for now, we have 2 people who are kind of like immediately infatuated with each other, and I think it's really weird. Like, it's very, very odd in like a modern perspective, especially because of how little time they've spent with each other so far and how long it's been in both timelines since this has occurred. So for Clementine, it's been like maybe a month or 6 weeks since that one weekend that she randomly meets the like love interest in the modern timeline. And like, I don't really know why they are so obsessed with each other. I suppose like he has more perspective on the past, but like she doesn't know that, and he should also be aware that she doesn't remember everything. So I don't really know where his energy is coming from. Like he should be aware, based on the timeline, that they haven't seen each other like maybe twice, because she has returned to the apartment one other time, very briefly. They had dinner together and then she just booked it. So like, he should know that they haven't spent significant time together yet. So he's coming on really strong in the modern timeline, like constantly whispering in her ear. I might be someone who is like on the oppositional side, like I'm an outlier, but I don't like that he nicknamed her Lemon. I think that's kind of gross. One thing, it's the most random nickname. It's not a natural nickname either. Like, there wasn't any kind of circumstance where they kind of were joking around, it became an inside joke. He just decided to call her Lemon. She showed immediate dislike for that, and he just kept doing it. And he calls her it all the time. So I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, who gives someone else a nickname? Like, what kind of personality is that? The dialogue is also very cheesy. And that's actually something that I'm very confused about, because there's a handful of people right now in the booktube community reading a novel love story by this author, the most recent publication, and everyone's critique is, well, there's a couple critiques. 1, the audiobook isn't great, and 2, the cheesiness factor is out the wazoo, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you all adore this book, and it is super cheesy. Like the dramatic lines, like the one-liners that are coming from our 26-year-old Ivan's mouth, like somehow he's a wizened old man and knows everything and is teaching Clementine how to love. That's really weird to me. I know that he's very different from his modern perspective, and reading forward, you'd probably see what has happened to him, why he's hardened, why he's changed in such a way, because he is quite different from his younger, happy-go-lucky self. But I am kind of like, why are we feeding him such unrealistic lines? It's very odd and very cheesy because of also the repetition. We're seeing so many comparisons to past scenes that it's like it's becoming too much. The lemons, the color yellow, the recipes that you can never remake twice the same way, the fettuccine from the past timeline for Analia and Vera, and now that for like his lemon pie tart thing. I just feel like the parallels are too much and like not giving the reader enough credit. It actually reminds me of YA. And I'm not sure if I said that in the last update, but it does, because like it shouldn't be that spoon-fed to us. Like it's actually kind of like suffocating. On that note, I'm actually gonna DNF it. Oh no. Like, I mean, come on, we all saw this coming. I was clearly just like listing off all the things that I didn't really understand about this, but I really have to say, like, I probably would be a fine 3-star. Like something that I kind of find boring for the most part, but if I really wanted to take my time with it, I would just read it, kind of probably forget about it very soon after. And that's why I'm actually really confused. I'm surprised that this is so well loved. Is it that in the last 100 pages, this book just knocks it out of the park? Because for now, I do find this narrative to be pretty let me collect my words. I find it very predictable. I also find it very forgettable. It's doing all of the classic things we expect in a traditional rom-com that we see nowadays that, you know, are publishing under 1 million titles. So it's not really doing anything that unique in my opinion. We've also seen the concept before, just like Heaven, The Lake House. I'm sure there are some books that do this as well. The Time Traveler's Wife, I guess. So I don't really know why people clung to this to such a degree. Maybe the audiobook is amazing and I just don't have access to it, so I haven't had the pleasure of experiencing it. But I really find this to be just a baseline romance, run-of-the-mill, nothing wrong with it, nothing inherently terrible about the relationship beyond it falling into the insta-love trope. But yeah, it kind of... I'm confused. Can someone explain this to me? Maybe at the end of the day, it's just that I'm heartless, but like I do have a handful of romances that I really like. I know I've been listing all of the like negative or just kind of like fine qualities of this book, but the one thing I did appreciate that I'm kind of sad that it didn't work out for me was that this feels so far to be one person POV. It's first person, which isn't my favorite, but the fact that it only follows Clementine, that was a strength in this category for me. I think too often we see romances that are showing both sides, making everything super obvious. And I also, like, I'm going to be the person to say that a lot of women authors in romance aren't good at writing men. I've seen authors who've been able to juggle all types of gender perspectives, sexual orientations, and it's been perfectly fine. But I would argue that certain romances, their, you know, descriptions of men or descriptions of women based on men, their conversations just kind of like fall flat. So maybe it's just a me thing, but I prefer to have the question of what is the other person thinking first and foremost, and just sticking to a very solid, in-depth character analysis of one person. So that is one strength I have for this one, unless, you know, in the last 100 pages we get his POV, because then I'll be glad that I missed that. But yeah, so I'm sorry to those who are participating in the 5-star exchange, specifically to those who obviously this book represents, the person that this is supposed to, you know, be a part of, whether it be Nell, Katie, Vanessa, or Bree. I'm gonna have to solidify who I actually think this list is. I think I ended my intro wondering if it might be Nell, and I am tempted, but the poison study is really throwing me off for that then, because I could see it being the rule book and the 7-year slip, and then maybe a stretch. Maybe it's a book that Nell wants to read for that like Lakeview Billionaires book. But a study in poison, or a poison study, that messes with me, because I feel like it contradicts whoever would want to read Sarah Adams. I don't think this is representative of Vanessa, so I'm gonna ixnay that right now. I think I said that at the beginning. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say Bree or Vanessa, actually. I think those two, it makes more sense. I think I'll go with Bree, the book trovert. Okay, I'm changing my mind. Oh God, I might be wrong. I think this is gonna be Bree, the book trovert, that this book list represents. So the person who gave me this list isn't Bree. This is meant to be the list that represents Bree, and the person who ended up making that list, I think, is Nell. Okay, I'm clarifying, that's what I'm doing. I think that Nell gave me a list that represents Bree, the book trovert. We'll see if I'm right, because right now I'm going to cut to the reveal. But for now, I gotta get to work. So I'm so sorry, friends, romance lovers. This is just, we knew this was gonna be a possibility, right? Like we knew, I think we kind of knew. Alas. If you want, put in the comments a romance that you think I would actually like. I think that would be a good challenge, because at the moment, it's just, I have this very narrowed perspective of what kind of romances I like, and this one didn't work out. For if you need a reference, one that I really loved recently is If I Never Met You by Barry McFarlane. I gave it 4.25 stars, and I read it within the same month that I read 7-Year Slip. So there we are. All right, on to the reveal.
Hi everyone, it's Vanessa. Why did I choose the books that I chose? That's a great question. And you know what? You deserve a great answer. However, my logic skills with this selection were minimal. I kind of just took a shot in the dark. I was like, you know what? I think these are good books. Maybe they will also think they are good books. Let's see what happens. I did look through Goodreads. I did look through different various things to try and get a little bit well-rounded selection. But for the most part, it was absolutely a shot in the dark. But who am I really? Hi. It's me, Katie. My channel is I Would Rather Be Reading, where I do weekly reading sprints, so you can come, bring a snack, bring a book, let's hang out, let's chat all the bookish things. I also love to have reading vlogs and do fun collabs like this, and I really just am getting more into like vlogs, day in the life with books involved as well. That's kind of my jam. I've been kind of in a little intermediate break, if that makes sense, but in the fall everything is coming back full swing. I also love to participate in readathons, so you will find that I'm a host in different readathons throughout the year. I love competitive reading and things like that. My jam in terms of reading is fantasy, romance, and occasional thrillers to mix things up, but that's really where I spend a good majority of my time. Currently this year I'm really into fantasy romance men so bad. I have it so bad for them. Small town romances, single dads, of course, we know this. There is no illusion there. And motorcycles, bikers. I'm really into it. That's like my jam this year, but it changes every single year. So if that sounds like your thing, I would love to have you come join me over on my channel and be part of the chaos.